Thanks very much, Professor Reimer, for having nearly precisely to time. Yes, you need a break now. I will immediately ask Dr. Sergio Carrera, who is the head of the Justice and Home Affairs Unit of the Center for European Policy Studies, to take over and add his comments. Unfortunately, only 7 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this amazing event. So it seems we have a European border and coast guard. That may come as a surprise for many of us. And does this really mean then that Frontex is something of the past? Or as Jorrit started with his presentation, does this mean that Frontex is dead? Well, perhaps some of us may find relief when, after listening to Jorrit's presentation and the point that I will convey in my speech, that this European Border and Coast Guard rather constitutes a new ambitious brand, or a name of what in fact is a revamped version of Frontex. So indeed, one could conclude that Frontex remains very much alive. And in fact, when one studies the origins of Frontex, it's very telling that Frontex was all about everything but establishing a community, a European border and coast guard. It was actually the manifestation of past failures to do that. In 2002, there were many discussions about and feasibility studies and reflections about having a community body really taking charge of border management. And the solution was not, or let's say the path taken was not to do so. It was instead to set up a polycentric network model that will be coordinated by a body, which will have a difficult job to do that, of course, as we've seen during the last years, in coordinating a whole web, an amazing web of national authorities and actors working on border-related matters. So Frontex origins were all about the lack of consensus for a community-based approach, and instead developing a model based on ad hoc coordination centers. If you look at the documents published by the Council during 2002 and 2003, you will understand how in these Skifa Plus discussions, you will understand very well this networked-based model that since then Frontex has developed. And this model was also based very much on information exchange. It was not so much related to operational activities on the ground. It was more about, let's link all those networks and exchange information through this hub that would then become Frontex. So since the beginning, Frontex has been intrinsically entangled and dependent upon member states' authorities' games and strategies. And this has made the work of Frontex, of course, very difficult. And even more so, as Professor Monar said, because this is an area which is increasingly politicized and where expectations are very high. But Frontex hands have been very much tied to these domestic realms and fields. So in fact, instead of talking about integrated border management, what we've seen during the last more than decade is a rather disintegrated border management scene where Frontex has been working. And when you read this regulation, this European Border and Coast Guard regulation, in fact, it's not only a confirmation of this model, of this network model, but a reinvigoration of this system. Not least, as Jorrit mentioned, because the agency is still tied. The hands of this new agency will be tied to member states' green light for doing many things. I mean, if you look at the management board, it still has a very predominant role, member states' representatives, but also because it expands the number of actors that the agency, at the national level, that the agency will be expected to coordinate, and will include the coast guards. And this is even more fun to look at. If the Schengen-related authorities are quite a lot and quite diverse at the national level, when you study the Coast Guard communities, the picture becomes even more interesting and diverse. There are more than 50 authorities, under 30 ministries, only in the Mediterranean countries. And this new agency will be supposed to coordinate their actions. Well, good luck. All the best of luck for the new agency. Not least, when sharing information, we all know that those actors don't like to share information for very good reasons, but also at times of coordinating so-called multi-purpose operations. And by this I mean we have the military and the defense coming into the picture, into what Schengen used to be and is until now, a predominantly civilian, professionalized border guards, police, authorities actor. Now we have the military and the quasi-military actors coming into these activities. And I tell you, this is going to be a difficult task for the agency. Now you could argue, what's the problem? Actually maybe good that you have all these issues between competent authorities at the national level. They keep themselves controlled, and there are checks and balances. The problem is that this leaves a gap that has become very much present and visible during the crisis. A gap which relates to who does search and rescue in the Mediterranean. Who helps those people at distress at sea? And this new regulation doesn't provide us with a satisfactory answer. Now, my last point is this politicization. We've seen that the agency is now having or will have more competence on issues like expulsion and return, which is a very hot potato. The European Parliament has been always very hesitant for Frontex to have more competences in this area. This regulation expands the competences of the European Border and Coast Guard here. We are all very well aware how ineffective expulsion policies in the EU are. And guess who is going to be blamed for the number of enforced return decisions not to reach the expected levels. Now, to conclude, so the EU does in fact not have a European border guard yet, I will argue. The name is certainly there, but the flesh is still very much lacking. And I think that it will be inevitable in an area where we have a lot of European Union law, the Schengen Borders Code, expulsion, EU expulsion law, to think about the establishment in the near future of a common European service, border and asylum service. And I will leave you with this idea. I don't have the time to explain it. I left copies of a new CEPS report, task force report, that we've implemented during the last 6 months. And we've been thinking with a group of distinguished colleagues and friends about the future of Frontex. And we really think that it will be, the next step will be this. We've been moving from the network-based model to something else, which actually has hands-on the field. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Carrera.